This is the plan: BMX bike, weld a piece of tube onto the back here for the seat post to go to the hoop, and then the front of the headstock so that it doesn't affect the steering, probably some sort of secondary brace, and then I'll probably end up with some sort of piece down here as well, I think, and maybe even a secondary brace on the inside there, just for your, maybe for your back. I don't know how you're going to sit on this, but maybe your back to the hoop, just so you've got some sort of support when you do roll it over, because otherwise you're going to just fall off the pedals, I think, depending on how fast you go. I'm not sure how the physics of that's going to work yet. So this is the BMX that I've picked up for this project. It looks like it's in okay nick, other than the back brakes don't work. It's missing one of the rubber baby buggy brakes. The front brakes work fine, which is the only one that we need anyway. Well enough to do a stoppie, and of course if anything breaks we've got the spares we can nick from the back. Although I might just repair the brakes for what it's worth to just be a stop if you need to. We'll do a little bit of defunking, take off the reflectors, get rid of some of all this dog related livery. I don't know much about BMXs, so don't laugh at me if this is a child's BMX, or I don't know if they're supposed to be that small, but it feels really small. This bike's called a Chaos, and then there's a dog print on there. Yeah. Absolutely no street credit reflections, is there? Heat gun always makes short work of these. I just got one of these dodgy Chinese copy heat guns from eBay. It's a Makita knockoff. I wouldn't recommend it, it's not very good. The powered one's much hotter, does the job much better, but for this sort of thing they're okay. But not worth the money in my opinion. Fork out and buy a better one. Oh, it looks so much better. A bit plasticky on the guard and what have you, but we can live with that. Nice purple colour. So you might have spotted in the background, quality tube roller. No expense spared, cheapest one on eBay. In fact, no, it was Amazon. I think it was £180. I've been after a tube roller for a while, planning on making my own handle for this and just modifying a few bits, strengthening it up, but I think it'll do what it needs to do. Also, I'll be 3D printing some different dies for rolling tube, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, a bit of a review on that whilst we're at it. Overall, the quality actually looks pretty good versus some other stuff that I bought from the same supplier, so yeah, I'd have liked to have seen an Acme thread on there rather than a cut thread like so, but if it's rolling, basically the root diameters of these, the fact that it's cut with a sharp tool basically just means that it's a stress adder, and if you're adding a lot of force down through the bottom here, it could likely cause fractures, although it will be compressing actually, so maybe that wouldn't be such a problem, but it's more just the fact that it's harder to turn than if you've got a bigger machined Acme style thread. Also a little bit unsure about these slots. I'd have preferred to see holes drilled in here. There's always the opportunity in the future to just drill a set of holes underneath or weld a piece over with some holes in there, just purely on the fact that it's not going to move if they're not tight enough and there's quite a lot of force on there. It might actually cause the rollers at the bottom there to just sort of slip away and give you inaccuracies if you're trying to repeat jobs that you're working on. I'll give a bit of a review on that, how that goes as well, but overall quality looks pretty good given the price. Feel like there could be some calculations about how long this piece of metal wants to be, but I do feel like we're going to end up having to do this in two sections, just because the lengths of tube that I can fit in the car comfortably are like 2.4 meters or something. So I'll get this square section rolled up, we'll see how it goes, and then I'll decide whether it needs more rolling or less rolling. And we're not going to do a technical approach to this, we're just going to start and see how it goes. We're going to use the £5,000 workbench. Section here is not going to get any roll into it, so obviously there's a benefit from bringing the outer rollers to the inner section, just so there's less waste on the end. So I hadn't considered that, so I'll just do a little bit of a tweak there. I've never used one of these before, so this is a learning curve. Okay, so I've just broke the top collar that sits on top of the bearing. I'm not being particularly rough with it either, so rather than the collar that they've got underneath this, that's basically pushing down on the bearing to hold it in the down position when you go down, I'm just going to get a large spreader washer that goes further over here, and then I'm going to put 2 nuts on there and back tighten it down so that it can't move. It gives me some adjustment for take up, and it'll spread, rather than having all of the load on one thread at the bottom, it'll spread the load up a couple of threads. So the only problem is I don't know what thread this is, I'll have to have a measure. I did check my box and found this guy, but the threads look a little bit too coarse. It's hit and miss, so I'm going to pull this out. I need to pull it out anyway, and then yeah, see where we end up from there. That bearing pack, it looks like it will actually roll up against the nut, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and put that straight on the bottom there. I'm going to be careful to put this facing down because the ball bearings can come out the bottom, so I will actually put it on that way, and that way it's not putting stress onto the ball bearings. 2 reasons for the grease: one, obviously lubricating; second one, when I do try to assemble it, hopefully it'll hold everything in place and just stop that all falling out. So I put the first nut onto the bottom, and then the assembly fun really begins, because we have this pack here to try and reassemble. Now look how concentric everything is. Lovely machining, guys. Right, I'm blowing a bit. You can see we've got a nice curve on that. Looks lovely, doesn't it? The only problem is, every time I go through now it hits the roof, so I have to try and either mount this on the floor or find somewhere with a bit more clearance. Maybe outside actually, so I think that's a job for tomorrow. I'll roll the table outside and we'll do it outside. So I just came over and offered it up to the bike for a bit of a giggle, and you know what, it's not actually looking that far off. It's somewhere near, to be honest. But this is where I've got to with the 2 hoops. As you can see, this radius is slightly larger than the first one that I rolled, and you end up with a straight section in the middle. So what I'm going to do, rather than having the wastage in the middle and chopping that bit out, I'm going to weld that together and then rerun it through the roller, and then try and keep a uniform roll throughout the entire hoop. I'll bring the roller outside so we're not worried about headroom. So that's welded up, one giant hoop. Not a perfect weld, but it's pretty damn good. So we'll just roll that through the roller now and see where that gets us to. It's slightly squiff, but I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. So the next thing we're going to have to do is grind up the front part of the there's a name for that, the steering yoke, where it goes on there, headstock, that's it. So grind up the headstock there so we've got something to weld onto, and then I'll probably just do a bit of grinding on the back somewhere. We're going to weld on the back as well. On the back I've ground up this section, so I'm going to weld a triangular brace in there, and then we're going to follow to the back and then reconnect to the hoop, and then maybe a diagonal up or maybe a straight up so you can use it as a backrest sort of thing. Not 100% sure on that yet. Put the hoop in there and it's just slightly bent over, so I'm going to try and straighten it up best I can. So I'm actually very happy with how this has come out. I think I'll be adding some form of rubber trim or grip to the outside edge, just to give it a little bit of grip on any hard surfaces, tarmac, that sort of thing, concrete, when you do roll over. And then obviously it's not such a problem on grass, because at least you've got a soft landing if you do fall off it. It's not the neatest welding, but it's not a fashion contest either. This spread and plate came out really well. And then I just tied that in with this other bar down to the main post, just to try and triangulate things a little bit more. I might have gone a little bit conservative on the hoop size. It felt like I was still quite big. I think it's not like we're going to be doing big miles on this, so it's probably not such a problem. But I do feel like it could have been a little bit higher on the hoop front. Self-amalgamating tape, it's sort of like a rubber tape, 25mm thick, 25mm box section. So I'm hoping that that'll save me a lot of messing around, but it does stick to itself, so I'm not sure how much of a mess that's going to make. But I'll try a small section because it's easy. If that doesn't work, super glue and a bit of rubber from an old tyre in a tube, I think. First part went brilliantly, and then as we went further around, someone got a little bit too cocky, but I think it's good enough for what we're after. It's only going to get knackered anyway, because to be honest, this is not going to end up shiny side up. I loaded the I identify as a hamster ball bike into the back of the van, and then we went down to the local park for the first round of testing.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so I made a giant cock up with the size of the hoop. I knew coming down here that I'd welded it too low, and it felt alright the night that I was doing it in the garage. But obviously I wasn't taking into account the helmet and the fact that you need to try and pedal it and get it up to speed as well. But the big one, the weight over the handlebars. So because you sat quite low and central on the bike, when you pull the brakes, it just wants to slow you down. It doesn't actually initiate the back end going up. So I was leaning quite far forward and still struggling with my body weight being down the middle of the bike. We're moving the handlebars as far forward as possible, just to try and help me get my weight further forward. Almost stuck the landing. Oh my. We've come up to the park to use the ramp on the downhill section. We're hoping to jab the brakes on the downhill and then stop before we get into this, because otherwise if we hit this and we're already rolling over, it might blow a hole in the space-time continuum. So that didn't exactly go as planned. The rollover initiation sequence is the hardest part. So where we are at the park today, it's wet on the ground, so I couldn't really test it on the grass, which was kind of what my hopes were, to be honest. The biggest changes moving forward, so the bike, I think this whole hoop needs lifting up, maybe just about 6 inches to give you a little bit more room comfortably inside, allow you to weight transfer to the front. Also, when I'm going over, I'm landing and my head is kind of bouncing around here, so if you have that 6 inches higher, you'll be able to lean a little bit further forward, and we could probably put some of this foam wrap up on this so nobody's banging their head and losing the teeth. The ultimate thing to do is to come back with somebody who has any form of BMX riding talent one evening this week, generally just to throw ideas around about how we can make things better, or somebody that's stupid enough to go into the bowl would be pretty cool as well. Not a total disaster, but we will be back. Try again. Yep.